It's the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Mike McIntyre. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's start with the good news. The lead levels in the blood of Cleveland's children dropped for the second straight year and is the lowest ever recorded, according to the Cleveland Department of Health. Lead is a toxin that can lead to all kinds of health and learning problems, and Cleveland has been fighting to rid old houses of lead for years. And now the bad news. Most of the grant from the state funded with federal pandemic money to help clear lead from houses is being clawed back because Cleveland is spending it too slowly. Another missed opportunity. When a driver veered around stopped traffic and through a crash scene on I-90, striking and killing a responding Cleveland firefighter, did the driver commit murder? The Cuyahoga County prosecutor pressed that case before the Ohio Supreme Court this week, saying the actions of Leander Bissell in 2022 showed he knowingly caused the death of Johnny Tetrick. Bissell's lawyer argued instead it was reckless behavior, deserving of involuntary manslaughter, and didn't rise to the level of murder. Central Ohio billionaire Les Wexner, a big supporter of Ohio State University, was named in some FBI documents as a co-conspirator to child trafficking with Jeffrey Epstein, discussed during a House Judiciary Committee hearing on the Epstein files this week. Wexner has denied any knowledge of Epstein's crimes and is slated to testify before the committee next week. Epstein served as a financial advisor to Wexner before a falling out. And overtime has ballooned for Cuyahoga County sheriffs, some of whom are raking in more than double and in a few cases triple their salary. The county executive wants to seize control of the budget from the sheriff, and the sheriff has threatened to sue if he does. And joining me to discuss all of these stories and more, the top stories of the week from IdeaStream Public Media, education reporter Connor Morris. Good morning, Connor.
Hi, glad to be here.
Glad to have you with us. Also with us is Abigail Botar, who concentrates on all kinds of stories from Summit County to East Palestine. Good morning to you, Abigail.
Good morning.
Good to have you with us. And in Columbus, a woman who would break the bank if she collected overtime. State House News Bureau Chief Karen 24/7 Kassler. Good to have you with us.
I love my job. I love my job.
You live and breathe your job, that's for sure. All right, let's get ready to roundtable. The state is clawing back more than $3 million from a nearly $5 million grant it awarded Cleveland for a program that would help rid old houses of lead. The Ohio Department of Development administered the grant as part of the Lead Safe Ohio program. It would pay up to $15,000 to remove old windows and doors, which is a major source of lead paint chips and flakes that expose occupants to lead poisoning. Lead can cause permanent neurological damage in children, and Cleveland has been working for years to remove lead from its older housing stock. The city's health director says there's actually promising news. Testing has shown for the second straight year a reduction in lead levels for kids, but still, losing millions that can be used to continue the progress is frustration. Abigail, the bottom line from the state's perspective was that if the city isn't going to spend it quickly enough, and it's federal money that could disappear from the state, let's get it to somebody that can get it done.
Yeah, and city officials from Cleveland say it's been really hard to spend the money. They can only spend $15,000 for new doors and window replacements per house,
right?
Which they say has made it incredibly difficult to get the money out the door fast enough. And they also said like $15,000 per house is not enough to make the house completely safe and lead-free. Some people estimated up to $100,000 for some of the housing stock in Cleveland. So obviously it's a huge loss to lose any money to chip away at that, but the city says it's kind of been impossible to get it out fast enough.
Yeah, part of the issue here is that the $15,000 is just for windows and doors. That is one source, but many of these houses have tons of other problems. So they need to combine other grants. They have other money that's coming in, and you put all that together, but then it's a matter of logistics. Can we get all the grants timed at the same time? And the requirement of this thing is that when you're done with the windows and doors, you're able to certify that the house is lead safe, but it isn't because there's all these other things that need to be done.
Yeah, it's really tricky. And the city almost lost $11.9 million last spring in federal grants for lead remediation, but they were granted a reprieve. And I believe they hired someone to help kind of coordinate the grant funding to make sure that it's getting out the door fast enough. So they do have other money. They have $10 million from 3 separate Department of Housing and Urban Development grants to continue remediation efforts. They say they'll have 90 properties remediated with these state funds before they're pulled. So there is still movement. This isn't like the end of the road by any means, but it is showing a glaring problem in, tackling this issue.
Yeah, they've got to get their act together for those other grants too, because as you said, it was a reprieve. It wasn't like, okay, you're fine, you don't have to meet the requirements.
Right.
And Connor, Cleveland says the grant is structured to make it difficult to spend the money. We talked a little bit about that now, but when you think about all of the alchemy that goes into that, spending $15,000 on doors and windows is nice, but it isn't going to get you there.
Yeah, if anybody has been to Cleveland in general and you've seen the housing stock, you understand that these houses need a lot of work. I mean, the porch sagging, roofs are collapsing, and folks just don't have the money to fix these big budget items, in their homes. And the lead can be in every kind of aspect of the home office and the paint, of course. So,
Right.
and as an education reporter, just a quick note. I mean, this is partly why there are some, issues with learning in the city. In general, folks say that, yeah, as we mentioned at the top of the show, lead poisoning can lead to problems with learning, behavior, etc. But yeah, I mean, generally speaking, there's some blame going around about the city not getting its ducks in a row on this front. We should also mention on the other side, though, that the Lead Safe Cleveland Coalition has allocated about almost $50 million in grants in recent years, roughly almost 500 units remediated as of like late last year. So this has been a multi-city-wide effort. There's been a lot of hard work from tons of people in the city to work on this, and that's why you see these rates declining in recent years. But still, there remains this issue of trying to get all these grants stacked on top of each other and then and this has been long been a problem in the city.
And the city has been working on it for a long time and has had many of these types of problems where we get the money, but yet we don't have the inspectors that we're supposed to have. And so then they were getting dinged for that. And then we didn't do this, we didn't do that. The health director who delivered good news and said, listen, what the efforts that we've done so far have borne out is that lead levels in the blood of the children that we're testing is lower. It's lower for 2 straight years now. It's the lowest it's ever been. It's still way too high. And as you mentioned, if you have lead levels at a certain point, you're going to have learning problems and other types of issues, long-term health stuff. But he said, even though there has been progress, Cleveland has got to figure this out because that's where the grant money is going to stay, and that's where we're going to continue to make progress, where our children are able to learn and not have these long-term health impacts.
Of course, and it's not just a Cleveland problem, although it is acute here. It's in large cities across the country, especially just places that have a lot of low income, like just poor housing stock and folks that can't afford to keep up their homes,
Yeah, any place with old houses is going to see this because they used to think it was a great idea to slap lead paint on everything.
Yes.
Way back in the day, and it's way underneath all the other latex paint layers that you have today.
Exactly.
All
Worrisome.
right. We're going to move on, but I do want to let you know that you can feel free to join our conversation by sending an email. SOI@ideastream.org is the way to get through, and we'll be able to incorporate your comments throughout the program. Again, SOI@ideastream.org. Cuyahoga County Executive Chris Ronayne wants to take control of the finances for the county sheriff's department as overtime costs there soar. The sheriff has said he'll sue if that happens. So, Connor, let's talk about that. When I read this, kind of my eyes popped out a little bit when we talk about the amount of overtime some of the sheriff deputies are collecting.
Yeah, dozens of sheriff's deputies, corrections officers saw their base salaries double and in some cases triple in 2024, and that trend kind of continued in the last year. Corrections officers typically earn in like the mid $60,000 range. Sheriff's deputies earn roughly $90,000 a year. But in 2024, I mean, they just kind of dominated the salary list. Many getting paid well over $175,000, more than the county executive in a lot of cases. One deputy retired that year with nearly $200,000 in overtime pay. So his total pay was like $312,000. And just a quick shout out to Caitlin Durbin over at Cleveland.com. She's a friend of mine. I was just reading her story on this. And it just, yeah, exactly. It does make your eyes pop out.
Do you often just call out your friends here on this program?
Yeah. Yes.
Great reporting by Caitlin. And let's talk about some of the issues. So the sheriff's department is saying, listen, we're understaffed. We need this kind of overtime in order to cover for things. The executive is saying it's out of control and I need to take control of their finances. So what are some of the things the county executives say is contributing to the overtime costs?
Yeah, so he's arguing that he's trying to kind of hold the sheriff's office accountable for the use of taxpayer dollars. He wants tighter controls over just, in general, employee use of overtime. He said that there's been an internal audit that found that this was a problem. Inspector General report on mismanagement as well. And he's saying that it's straining the budget. Meanwhile, the sheriff's office is saying, you're not letting us hire the people that we need, so we're going to have higher overtime in general. As well, there's some disconnect around higher turnover as well, so especially at the jail level. So that internal audit found that that turnover creates more vacancies and training gaps, which is often filled with overtime. So it's kind of a vicious cycle.
One of the things I read was that the schedules for the sheriff's deputies and some of those others in this list is like a 12-hour schedule for something like 4 days a week or whatever. So that really built in already is overtime into their regular schedule. There's like a several hours of overtime. So that's sort of the base level. But then if someone calls in sick and then someone else comes in on overtime to cover that, we then are adding to the kitty. The sheriff, though, says this isn't a problem with our scheduling, or it's not a problem with anyone committing any kind of abuse. As we noted, it's essentially we need a ton more people, and the same studies bore that out. They do need more people in order to staff these positions without paying overtime.
Yes, and there were, there was a gentleman with the Ohio Patrolmen's Benevolent Association, the union, that said the same thing. The county has never hired enough people to fill for the need. Also, there's an interesting kind of play here with vacation, sick time, compensatory time, family medical leave. Once all of those things are factored in, the amount of hours available to work for some folks is just, it's not enough, to fill the needs of the jail and of the sheriff's office.
And we should note, it was not just the sheriff's office that's saying that. It's the Ohio Patrolmen's Benevolent Association, the union that's representing sheriff's deputies who's saying, listen, you just don't have enough people to fill the gap.
And there are also mandated staffing minimums to maintain what they say is safety and order at the jail, too.
Okay. Cuyahoga County prosecutors argued before the Ohio Supreme Court Wednesday that a murder conviction is appropriate for the man who struck and killed Cleveland firefighter Johnny Tetrick as the firefighter was responding to an accident on I-90. Leander Bissell was convicted of murder, but an appeals court reduced it to involuntary manslaughter. Bissell struck Tetrick as he drove around stopped traffic at an accident scene near Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. And Abigail, the argument in this case comes down to the distinction of what he knowingly did and what he might have recklessly did. And that's where it goes from manslaughter to murder. Let's talk about that argument.
Sure, yeah. So, essentially the appeals court found that Bissell did not know that his actions would lead to Tetrick's death. And the argument hinging on the word knowingly, prosecutors say there's no way that he couldn't have known that his actions could lead to someone's death because he was driving through an area that had been blocked off for first responders to deal with this accident. So he drove around stopped traffic into a lane that was blocked off where prosecutors say he should have known there would have been firefighters, paramedics, police officers responding to the scene on foot. So he should have known that he could have hit somebody. So that's what prosecutors are saying. Yeah. His lawyer says that he thinks he's like, someone died at the end of the day, but he doesn't understand why this wouldn't just be viewed as recklessness, which would be the involuntary manslaughter charge. So it's a really interesting distinction there between what someone knows and doesn't know when they're doing a reckless action.
Yeah, I saw the arguments, and the defense lawyer said this is standard, that unless you are looking at the firefighter and saying, I want to run that person down, that's knowingly I'm running him over, or you're being reckless, which is I went around traffic because I was tired of waiting, and then a guy walked out into the road because he was cleaning up debris, and I hit him. Now, the other thing that the justices were asking about was he didn't stop. Mm-hmm. And the lawyer was like, well, there's no evidence that he knew he even hit him. So the question is that reckless behavior or knowing behavior? And this goes a lot, well beyond just this one particular incident, because if we change the way we define whether you knew someone would die, not just being reckless and it resulted in someone's death, that seems to me to change the legal equation greatly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point. Yeah, I mean, I think it would be considered homicide if you took your car and was like, I'm going to hit this person, and you went and hit that person. That would be homicide or attempted homicide versus a car accident. Most of us aren't intending to kill someone when we go out in our cars every day.
But you might act recklessly.
Correct.
You might have been speeding. You might have,
what's the line there? I mean, it seems pretty egregious to be speeding through an area that's blocked off for first responders to deal with this accident, to circumvent all of the hundreds of cars that are stopped and backed up in this situation. So that's what prosecutors are saying. They're like, that action goes over the line of recklessness to murder, and the defense says, no, that's just recklessness. That's not anything different.
Karen, when I was watching this hearing, it seemed as though the justices, the kinds of questions they ask, and I know we do a lot of extrapolation from that, but it seemed that they were leaning toward Cuyahoga County's arguments. And Chief Justice Sharon Kennedy comes from a law enforcement background. She, in her questions, seemed to drill down on those points as well.
Yeah, she said along the lines of he, along with 27 other people, should have waited their turn to get into those far right lanes because there are plenty of cruisers, active red lights, creating the scene. And so, we can't guarantee which way that the justices are going to rule, but that certainly gives you an indication of the perspective that she came from, at least in terms of the question she asked.
Ohio law requires motorists to move over for emergency responders. It was expanded more than a decade ago to include other stationary vehicles, including road construction utility trucks. But there's still work to do, the state says, in order to keep things safe.
Yeah, the move over law requires you to move over with flashing lights, move over a lane or slow down whenever you see flashing lights, which means not only road crews, or not only law enforcement, but road crews and also trucks that have flashing lights, tow trucks, for instance, sanitation vehicles, that kind of thing. ODOT reports that 125 times this year, or last year rather, road crews were hit. And so far this winter, 53 snowplows have been hit. So there's a real concern here about the safety of people who are working on the roads, not just law enforcement, but anybody else that's out there.
Okay, and this is a little behind the scenes stuff. Everyone else, don't listen to this. Karen, can you turn your gain down a little bit?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to the next story that we're going to talk to you about once your gain is all set. Central Ohio retail billionaire Les Wexner is scheduled to be questioned under oath next week by the U.S. House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. The deposition is part of a congressional investigation into the business and social connections of convicted sex offender and accused child sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. Wexner's name became news this week when it was revealed that his was one of several that was originally redacted in the Epstein files. He was called a co-conspirator. Epstein died by suicide in 2019, and Wexner has denied any knowledge of any kind of criminal activity from Epstein. Is that right, Karen?
Yeah, and this all started because in a U.S. House Judiciary Committee hearing on February 11th, that's the same one where lawmakers were grilling Attorney General Pam Bondi, you had Representative Thomas Massie, who said that Wexner was listed in documents as a co-conspirator. I think he might have even said that a day or two before. A co-conspirator not to tax evasion, but to child sex trafficking. And that's a Republican congressman from Kentucky who's saying this, who's been a leading advocate for full transparency when it comes to the Epstein files. Now, as you said, Wexner has not been charged with a crime, but that label has been used in terms of co-conspirator for Wexner for quite a while. Now, next week, he is supposed to be deposed. He was supposed to go to Washington, D.C. to be deposed, but actually they're going to come here to Ohio and depose him in New Albany, where he lives, which is in the Columbus area.
And again, he's denied having any knowledge, but they had a very close relationship. Epstein was his financial advisor, one of his financial advisors. They had a falling out at one point, but there's no doubt that they did have a relationship.
Yeah, I mean, there are pictures in the files of Wexner and Epstein together. And like you said, Epstein and Wexner knew each other going way back in terms of helping Epstein start this business that made him wealthy. So, the question is, though, what level of guilt, if any, is Wexner in terms of his actions? And, at Ohio State, it's really interesting because there are a lot of buildings named for Wexner, including, most of the hospital system. And the president of Ohio State, Ted Carter, was on our fellow public radio station WSU this week and said he's gotten about 24 requests from people to remove Wexner's name from buildings. Now, obviously, Wexner has not been charged with any crime, has said he is not guilty of any crime, but it's the fallout is coming.
And one of the people that's calling for his name to be removed is a citizen journalist we've talked about here before, the Rooster, DJ Burns. And that was an interesting point. E. Gordon Gee, the former president, is now working at Ohio State again, running the new, I don't know what it's called, but the new...
the Chase Center.
The Chase Center. He was being questioned by the Rooster and some other journalist, and we saw an exchange right in a school building where one of the professors essentially grabbed the camera out of this guy's hand and knocked him to the ground.
Yeah, the Chase Center, it's actually the full title is Salmon P. Chase Center for Civics, Culture, and Society. It's one of these 5 so-called intellectual diversity centers that were set up right before Senate Bill 1, which was the bill that Republicans say would bring more free speech to campus and tamp down on what they called liberal ideology. So this center is definitely, I think, seen as more right-leaning than Ohio State maybe is seen. And so that's an interesting point to bring up here, that this professor, who has some very strong conservative credentials, was going after this journalist who is aligned with the Rooster, who presents some pretty liberal viewpoints. He's also a citizen journalist.
And they were essentially trying to question Gordon Gee and get into an area where he was, I think, with the elevator even, but they were going to try to talk with him, and that's when this exchange happened. We see the whole thing on video. So, and I think the professor has, according to Ohio State University, at the moment has been suspended.
Well, he's placed on administrative leave while the investigation continues. But I talked to Senator Jerry Serino, who it was really his idea, basically, to start these intellectual diversity centers. And he said he's concerned about, what this looks like when this is a center that's starting to come into its own. I mean, these are state-funded places where really the discussion is supposed to be, according to Serino, about American history and the Constitution and things like that. But the folks who are hired for it tend to have more conservative credentials.
All right, we're going to take a quick break right now, and when we come back, we'll talk about efforts in Columbus to cooperate with and some efforts to refuse cooperation with federal immigration enforcement. This is the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable. I'm Mike McIntyre, and we'll be right back. You are back with the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Mike McIntyre, along with Abigail Botar and Connor Morris, right here in studio with me. And State House News Bureau Chief Karen Kassler is in Columbus. She's been up for the last 48 hours, working every minute of it. If you listen to the show, why not also give our IdeaStream News Quiz a try as well? Each week, it tests your knowledge on the stories produced by IdeaStream, the State House News Bureau, and the Ohio Newsroom as well. You'll find it at ideastream.org/quiz. Mine just popped into my inbox just before the show started. So you can get it that way, or you can just go right online and find it there. And then sign up for it and have it delivered. A federal judge yesterday denied the Trump administration's request to pause a ruling that allows Haitians in the U.S. under temporary protected status to maintain that status. Thousands of Haitians with such protection live in Springfield. The administration's appeal, though, continues. Karen, do we know what the judge said in the ruling against the administration's request? What specifically?
Yes, I was listening in on that conversation between the judge and the lawyers. This was a hearing that was being held in Judge Anna Reyes's courtroom. And she did not issue a written opinion, but she said at the end of the hearing that she was not going to stay her order. And that order is the order that stops deportations of Haitians who the administration says do not have TPS. And it's not an extension of TPS. It's just stopping those folks from being deported. But it was really an interesting hearing because she doesn't believe that Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem consulted with any federal agencies before deciding to end TPS for Haitians, even though we've heard President Trump and others say that they supported ending TPS for Haitians. And she also made some comments about a database that the government does have on people who have TPS in the Springfield area the government does keep those addresses of people on file. And so she was concerned about what's going to happen with that. But I think probably the most interesting part of this, other than the decision, was she started talking about the death threats that she's gotten. And she read some of them in court out loud. I mean, these are profanity-filled, horrific things to hear. I can't imagine getting those in your inbox. But she said she welcomes criticism, but that shows that it's gone too far.
If you'd like to join our conversation, SOI@ideastream.org is a way to get your thought through. We also heard this week the administration say they didn't have any plans for a big crackdown in Springfield. But then again, TPS wasn't removed. Maybe that plan would happen after the status is lifted.
Well, again, they have the addresses of people with TPS, and so it would be something that could happen because they know where these folks are. So that's something that I think could come up. She's supposed to rule. She said she was going to rule sometime next week.
Okay.
So we wait to hear from that.
We'll talk about it next week then, for sure. The Trump administration announced yesterday it was ending its immigration surge in Minneapolis. Border Czar Tom Homan called Operation Metro Surge a success. 2 U.S. citizens were killed. Widespread protests gripped the city. But he credited coordination with local law enforcement as a factor in the success of the operation. Protests continue across the country, Karen, including locally. Yesterday, students at Cleveland Heights High School staged a long-planned walkout to show solidarity with immigrant families impacted by immigration and customs enforcement. Many of those participating have direct ties to immigrant communities, want the schools to be safe spaces. And in Akron, too, it became the latest to oppose proposed bills in the Ohio legislature that would require local police to help with federal immigration enforcement. So let's start with Akron. What is Akron doing to oppose this state legislation? Then Karen can fill us in a little more on the state legislation.
Yeah, council passed a resolution opposing a slew of bills, and my overview is that the bills would mandate local law enforcement to cooperate with federal authorities on detainer requests, essentially ban sanctuary cities, and allow federal agents to enter hospitals for immigration enforcement. I remember this was a thing that the American Civil Liberties Union was calling for. It's optional for local law enforcement, local sheriff's departments to partner with ICE. There's nothing that says that they have to enter into these agreements to either house immigrants or help them detain them, because their job is to enforce local and state laws.
And this sounds like something Cleveland had done
Yes.
recently as well. And in neither case have they said, we're going to obstruct ICE or we're going to block them. They're basically just saying, we got other stuff to worry about, and it's not our job to do your job.
Correct. Yeah. One council member in Akron in particular was like, we are stretched so thin with our policing, like struggling with hiring. There's enough violence and things that the police need to be focused on in Akron. We don't need them focusing on ICE's job. We don't need them to be doing that. So their argument is that this is an overreach of the state to essentially force local law enforcement to do the federal government's bidding.
And Karen, what are these lawmakers thinking? That the local police ought to work as crews to help enforce federal and immigration laws?
Well, it depends on which side of the aisle they're on.
Right.
You've got Republicans who have introduced a package for bills, which they're calling the cooperation package. So I think that pretty much says the viewpoint they have. But then you've got Democrats in the House who've said they'll introduce 8 bills to respond to what they feel is aggressive ICE efforts. So, yeah, it really depends on what side of the aisle you're on, whether you are agreeing with this. Now, Attorney General Dave Yost has said in the past that local communities don't get to decide about federal law, that, local communities can't print their own money, for instance. So he actually came out in support of the Republican bills. He actually stood with the sponsor as they were introduced.
Right. They don't print their own money, but they also don't have to print the money for the government if told to. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
The question is, what are you required to do? And when we hear the term like somebody's a sanctuary city, it's really a label that's put on whether you're cooperative or not, or cooperative enough or not.
Right. And, there's been bills. There was a bill that passed, I think, earlier this year or last year that specifically went after sanctuary cities. Now, Ohio doesn't have any official sanctuary cities, but some municipalities have passed ordinances saying that they will not cooperate with federal ICE enforcement and that sort of thing.
I think something people don't understand too is that immigration is a civil matter, not a criminal matter. Breaking immigration law is not a criminal act. It's a civil court, and so I think that's why people are especially upset when they're seeing violence in Minnesota. The things happening on the streets is a lot of these people haven't been convicted of actual criminal crimes that people maybe think would warrant that kind of action. It's a civil issue.
Okay. Let's go to a story that you've been working on this week. 2 former Twinsburg police officers have accepted a settlement from the city, collecting more than $150,000 to settle a lawsuit they filed against Twinsburg almost 2 years ago in April of 2024. They accused Police Chief Thomas Mason of allowing sexual harassment in the office, records tampering, and retaliation. And so the lawsuit was pending. These officers say that they were retaliated against because of the claims that they made, and now they've settled.
Correct. Yeah. So this lawsuit was a slew of problems. Alleging the police chief, Thomas Mason, allowed sexual harassment to run rampant in the department, that he was falsifying police records to keep his family members' names out of the police reports. And then essentially at the heart of this was a public records lawsuit because they were alleging that the city was not filling their records requests related to the lawsuit after either a little bit before or immediately after the lawsuit was filed. All 3 of the officers involved were put on administrative leave with no reason why. In the months following that, they were all fired for things that they and their lawyers say did not happen or were incredibly overblown. So the settlement, they did get thousands and thousands of records they had been requesting out of the settlement. They went into deposition and some information came out in that. And quickly after the deposition was when the city moved to settle.
So what did the city say about this?
They said that the settlement was purely a cost-benefit decision and that there's no claims, there's no merit to the claims that the lawsuit was making.
So does this end it all then?
No, because since after this lawsuit was filed, the city moved to fire these officers. They say that that violates their First Amendment rights because that was in retaliation to filing the original lawsuit. So they plan to sue the city again for that violation. And also something I had to dig back, this was 2 years ago, and kind of go through some of our reporting on what was happening. The claims the city made against these officers were pretty serious. And they say that there's no evidence for them. They say that these things just simply didn't happen. And so I can understand that they don't feel completely like they have justice from just that settlement, because they still feel like they need to clear their names in a way, because the city's kind of been throwing mud on their names for things that they say never happened.
So they settled a public records case, but they still have this First Amendment case.
Yes, so that has yet to be settled, but that is around. Essentially, they say the city retaliated against them for filing this original lawsuit by firing them.
Okay. The College of Worcester is cutting staff in response to shrinking enrollment. President Ann McCall announced that the school is laying off 22 non-faculty staff. And Connor, we have had tons of stories over the last 3 years about colleges shedding faculty and programs, about the consolidations in local school districts, all that kind of stuff. And yet you write this story about Worcester, and it seemed to take off. Like, people were really keyed into 22 people losing jobs at Worcester.
Yeah.
Tell me why the reaction, you think, has been so acute.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that these small colleges are super important to their communities, and these are the schools that kind of have tighter margins in some regard because their populations are small, meant to be smaller. So, about 15 years ago, they had 2,000 students. Now it's down to like 1,600 or a little less. And, that is a big impact on an institution. However, as we do these stories and we peel back the layers, we always learn that it's not just about enrollment and budget. As we were talking to people on campus, they're saying, well, actually, there's been a lot of turnover on campus. I've had like 5 different presidents over the last 15 years or so. And so there's some of that going on where folks are like, well, actually, I think there have been some unwise short-term, not looking at long-term decisions made. And also, these are folks that, the staff really isn't that large to begin with there at these
Right.
small colleges, So the university for their part, the college for their part says a lot of these were all administrative positions. A lot of these were non-student facing. But then you talk to students and they say, actually, these
We
were
need these people.
Yeah, they were at the writing center. All of these folks kind of touched our lives individually, and it feels like a big loss to them.
It's interesting, too, that I heard one of the faculty members you talked to say, while it wasn't faculty that's losing their jobs, we weren't consulted on this. Like, this
Yeah.
is just like a sudden decision, 22 people are gone, and maybe we could have had a better process.
Yeah, they said that the professor that I spoke to said that there is a structure. A lot of these colleges have like administrator and faculty structures where like advisory committees where they're like, well, we generally are pulled in to be consulted on big decisions at the college, and they say that did not happen here. So that led to a sense of feeling blindsided here by these folks on campus. And just a quick shout out, I did go to high school in Worcester, so as I was interviewing folks for this story, I was running to, you went to high school with my kid, I guess so I was kind of running into folks.
Northeast
like that,
Ohio
so.
is a very, very small place.
Yes.
More than half of the public school districts in Ohio, part of a coalition called Vouchers Hurt Ohio, are suing the state over how it funds schools, diverting money to vouchers for private schools. Lawmakers who approve of the vouchers say they allow for families to have education choice. A new bill introduced in Columbus would allow the state to yank funding from those districts that sue. So, Karen, this came up in the House, but it has the backing of State Senator Jerry Serino as well, the Republican from Kirtland. How would this work? If a school district says, listen, I don't want you to take my funding and give it to kids to take with them to private school because it's really going to hurt public education, and then the state says, well, we're going to double down? And I don't hear Karen.
I guess I turned my gain down too far.
All right. Yeah. Listen, when a doctor says one aspirin, don't take the whole bottle.
Okay, yeah. Well, what happens here is this bill would allow the Department of Education and Workforce to withhold state foundation funding for any school district that is part of a legal action over their state funding. And, Senator Serino told me earlier this week that he thinks it's a good idea because legislators have the power of the purse. He thinks it's bad for districts to be using the state's money, the money that the state sends to them, to sue the state over that. And he says he's not sure it's constitutional. He's not a lawyer, so he's not sure it's constitutional, but he thinks it's the right thing to do. The schools, on the other hand, and again, more than half of the state school districts, 320 districts, are suing the state over this. And they say that this is a bill designed to intimidate them, designed to get them to drop that lawsuit over vouchers. And they specifically shouted out my interview with Serino at their press conference, saying that it's lawlessness to say that a bill might not be constitutional, but we're going to do it anyway.
Right. They're calling it bullying and obviously, trying to coerce them. Where does the lawsuit right now stand?
The lawsuit is in the 10th District Court of Appeals after a Franklin County judge ruled that the system of the voucher system is unconstitutional, but she allowed everything to continue while the case goes forward. And this is specifically about the EdChoice and EdChoice expansion, those vouchers. And it's certainly going to go to the Ohio Supreme Court. There's just no question here.
Okay. It is almost time for public schools to submit their budget forecasts to the state for approval, and the districts in Cleveland and Akron say they'll need to make significant cuts over the next several years, despite already going through consolidation and collecting more money from taxpayers with levies last year. So, Connor, it was interesting to me because you've been writing about, and we mentioned just a little bit earlier, and broadcasting about all of the consolidations and cuts and shedding of programs and buildings. And yet they're saying it's not going to be enough. If we're going to balance these books into the future, we're going to have to look at cuts down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something that we're seeing across the state right now, almost kind of a contraction of sorts. From really high level, a lot of these schools have lost enrollment, especially in the bigger urban districts, and that means less money per kid. But yeah, in Akron and Cleveland, they're looking at running out of money entirely, like just being completely out of cash by 2029, 2030 time period. Seems like it's kind of out in the distance, but it's really not. If you can't prove to the state that you're not going to be fiscally salient, in the next 3 years, they put you on fiscal watch.
Yeah, you don't want that.
And you don't want that. And then if you, are running out of money during that time period, it gets to the point where they could even step in and be heavier handed, which is very unpopular. You don't want to see that happen in general. It means you kind of lose local control.
So Cleveland plans to cut $35 million each year over the next 3 years to keep it in the black. What about Akron?
Yeah, in Akron, they said they're going to have to cut $11 million over the next couple of years, and they've already made some big cuts. I mean, they cut like 285 positions a couple of years ago. So we're really going to be, they haven't announced what the plan is yet. In Cleveland's case, it's all wrapped up in this big consolidation plan. However, a lot of that is going to be staff salaries, the biggest expenses for any school district staff salaries, and we don't know what they're going to cut yet. They've said, well, we're going to operate less schools, so we've got 24 principals we're probably not going to have around. We could maybe move them elsewhere. But they haven't said yet, are teachers going to be on the chopping block, are other administrators? So we really don't know. We're going to have to look out for that.
All right. And just before break, let's do one other story. It's still legal in Ohio for minor girls to be married as long as their spouse is no more than 4 years older and they get a court order. I had no idea.
No.
That is a law in Ohio. Only men over 18 can marry in Ohio. But again, girls can be married as long as the person is no more than 4 years older and there's a court order that allows it. Lawmakers now are teaming up on a bill to ban marriage for anyone under 18 in the state. Karen, this is a bipartisan effort, it appears.
Yeah, you've got Senator Bill Blessing, who's a Republican, and Senator Bill DeMora, who's a Democrat, and they seem pretty fired up about this. The law did change in 2019 to get it to the point where it's girls need to be 16 at least with a court order if they're 16 or 17, and then boys need to be 18. But they said it should be 18. There's no question that Ohio should go to 18 for marriage because there are so many statistics that show that people who are younger than that are at higher risk for abuse, for rape, for trafficking. And basically when a girl is 16 or 17 and she marries a guy who's 18, the guy becomes her legal guardian. And so she can't file for divorce. She can't move out and sign a lease. She can't go to a lot of domestic violence shelters because they won't take somebody under 18.
Feel like this one's going to go pretty quick.
who knows? I know this idea has come around before, and there was a compromise in 2019, and so these lawmakers said they don't want to compromise. They feel that 18 is right. That if you're in love, you can wait until you're 18.
And there are advocates for survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault who have come out in support of this change as well.
Yeah, and that's the real concern here is forced marriage for girls under 18. And one other thing that the law or the bill does do is that it reiterates that Ohio recognizes only one man and one woman in marriage. So it doesn't overturn anything. It actually reiterates that that is Ohio law, and that's in the Constitution as well. So that's unenforceable because of the U.S. Supreme Court decision in the Obergefell case. But Ohio law still says that marriage is only between one man and one woman.
And that was Nancy's question, who just sent it in. Says, does this bill include a law that says marriage is only one man and one woman? And Karen, with her psychic powers, predicted that question and has already answered it for you, Nancy. All right, we're going to take a quick break right now. And when we get back, a stroll on Lake Erie was all the rage during the deep freeze, but a huge crack visible from space gives me pause. This is the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable. I'm Mike McIntyre, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable from IdeaStream Public Media. I am Mike McIntyre. Karen Kassler is with us from Columbus. Her gain is perfect. Abigail Botar and Connor Morris are with us as well. A Kent State University professor who witnessed the May 4th, 1970 shootings on campus and served as a faculty marshal, attempting to de-escalate the tensions there between students and the Ohio National Guard, has died. Jerry Lewis, an emeritus professor of sociology, died at his home in Maine on Wednesday. He spent the decades following the Kent State shootings, researching the tragedy and making sure people did not forget the slain students. In a prepared statement, Kent State President Todd Dyken described Lewis as a living trustee of history and the search for truth and meaning. He was 88 years old, and I just wanted to acknowledge his passing and what a leader he was. In fact, guys, I saw him. He led the first candlelight march the year after the shooting. Hundreds of students that were walking, and to commit to one of the parents of the students to say, I'll never let them forget, and then to follow through on it till he's 88. Somebody else will have to pick up that torch now.
He was an amazing man. I luckily got to hear him. He came and spoke to one of our classes. And he was so young when that happened, to witness such a horror.
He was like 35, 36 years old, something like that.
Yeah,
right?
he was
I do the math.
fresh into being a college professor. And Kent really went through a tough history of kind of trying to separate itself from that tragedy. And it's really his doing and the students that, now this is a university-run event, the Candlelight Vigil. Like, he really worked with the students to find how they could mourn and how they could commemorate. And it's been more than 50 years, and it's very sad. He was a wonderful person, and also very. He studied this. He did a lot of stuff with this. He was also like very well respected and published in his original field of work. So just an incredible person. I'm very sad that he passed.
And we'll be talking to people today. I think it's going to be you, Connor, actually, to be able to put together a story with what folks have said about his influence and impact.
Yeah. I've already been talking to folks. Roseanne Canfora of our Chick Canfora. It'll be a good story, I think.
Okay, very good. The long stretch of days at or below freezing ended this week when temperatures soared to the 50s or more across northeast Ohio. And then, just like Ohio, it changed its mind. And the next day, it was freezing cold again. But beginning today, we'll see a stretch of temperatures above freezing at least through the rest of the month if forecasts hold. And all the freeze cycles are taking a toll, especially on water mains and pipes. It sounded like meteors crashing on my roof earlier this week when there was enough melt that these ice dams and icicles started crashing off of the roof. So if you've been hearing that kind of stuff too.
Oh yeah, and there's water leaking through my window.
Oh
and
no, that's
everything.
not good.
Oh no.
Well, at least it's just the window.
Yeah.
One big pipe break impacted Cleveland Clinic Akron General Medical Center. Abigail, how did it do that?
Yeah, it happened last Saturday. It caused canceled appointments. They had to divert ambulances. People couldn't visit. It was a 12-inch pipe near the emergency department's entrance that burst in the early morning, and it flooded the entire first floor. I don't know if anyone saw those videos on social media of just like water pouring into the stairwell. Like it was crazy. So they, were able to resume ambulances and visitation after that this week. So it was just kind of a crazy accident there.
I have some friends that go out to the Lake Erie Islands, and they've been showing me videos of them walking all around there, and other folks that are taking snowmobiles and even little vehicles and driving across. And I remember back in the day, the word was you'd mark with Christmas trees after Christmas the path that you could drive to Put-in-Bay or to Kelly's Island. That was way in the past. But it seems like we had that kind of winter again, Connor. I have one question. First of all, would you go for a long walk out deep into the lake?
Not with this 80-mile long
Well,
crack
now-
that's like, gone across. It's too scary for me, man. I mean, it doesn't look very solid, but this crack that you can see from space. I mean, my creative mind, my imagination is really running wild. It's like there's this dark beasts trying to rise up from the lake that are gonna, explode outward.
They drive vehicles on the frozen lake.
Yeah, so now it's like
That's
they were
so
like little four-wheeler things. But back in the day, you'd get into the family truckster and drive over to the islands.
That's horrifying. I feel
You
like
go all the way across to Canada.
you
I
watch
guess you could.
one movie of someone like falling into a pond or a river thinking it was frozen, and I feel like I was scarred for life. Like I don't know how everyone else isn't scarred for
Scary.
life.
Our man Richard Cunningham did a story this week, and you can see his reel on Instagram too. You can follow us there at Idea Stream Public Media. But he went walking out there, and he said it was weird. He almost slipped. He said a little slippery out here, but
Yeah.
it was just kind of a weird experience. And I have friends that live on the Gold Coast in Lakewood who look right out and see people, way out there walking on the water. But
For me.
point now, there's a big crack. So maybe it's time to, and it's getting a little warmer, so let's bring
Reel that
ourselves
in,
in
maybe,
closer
yeah.
to the shore.
I'd say never do that.
And not only will we see a little bit of warmth coming our way, but days are going to start getting longer too. Starting Sunday, it's the first day that we're going to have a sunset at 6 o'clock or later
I'm so excited.
since November.
It's been so brutal. And with the snow being so tall, like it's important for me to leave the house. And no one has shoveled any of the sidewalks near my house. So I've been feeling very cooped up. I can't go on a walk. The snow's up to my knees.
By no one, you mean yourself too?
Well, I live in an apartment.
Okay.
And it's on the other side of the street. And also the hike and bike trails haven't been shoveled anyway. So I've been feeling very cooped up. So I'm happy the snow's melting. I'm happy to see some sun. I'm happy for spring to come.
And we are working on a story. Some of our interns are making some calls too about those roofs and the ice dams and how that might affect you, not just having water come in your window like it is Connor's. So do check out ideastream.org for our reporting as we go along. Of course, listen to the station as well. Ohio kicked off a statewide film series this week, paying tribute to the state's contributions to Hollywood productions both on and off the screen. From now until October, screenings will be held throughout Ohio. You can find an event guide online. It's all part of the celebration of America's 250th birthday. And the first event, Abigail, paid tribute to Thomas Edison in Milan, his birthplace.
Yeah, they showed the movie Frankenstein, which was produced by Edison's company, which I did not know. Everything is from Ohio.
Yeah, it all comes back to Ohio, doesn't it?
Yeah, they said that this would feature, like the series will feature Ohio-born actors, movies that are set in Ohio or centered on Ohio, which I believe is every movie.
Yeah.
So very excited to see every movie in Ohio this year.
Karen, which Ohio-based movie or connected movie are you hoping to see?
Oh wow. I was just actually counting that it's 48 days to
Oh,
the
I see.
Guardians home opener.
Okay.
So
I knew
but
you'd get
yeah,
that in. And
that's-
Pitchers and Catchers reported.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really good question. I don't know.
I mean,
So I'll have to think
draft
about
day,
that.
of course, right? All about
Oh,
Cleveland.
yeah, there is that.
I will
Okay.
say trains, planes, and automobiles. There's a shot of downtown Madison, which is where I grew up. Downtown is kind of a stretch,
Oh,
but
well,
it's in my hometown.
Superman,
obviously,
Oh my
yeah.
gosh, that's Cleveland
probably
and
more.
Cincinnati.
Perfect film.
All right, quick little feedback from Loey, who sends an email saying, while Ohio Constitution says marriage is just between a man and a woman, the U.S. law legalizing same-sex marriage has precedent. Same-sex couples are married in Ohio legally. That's right, Loey. That's exactly what Karen said, and thank you for reiterating that point. And we're going to close now with a discussion about one of the greatest bands ever to live. And they're from Akron, and it's Devo. And they're coming home. They're going to have a homecoming at the Akron Civic Theater in June. It's launching its Mutate, Don't Stagnate tour to celebrate more than 5 decades in music. Are you listening, Rock Hall voters? Let's get them in. The tour begins April 3rd. It rolls into Akron on June 3rd. Tickets are already limited. So before we leave, I want to say thank you to you, Connor, and to you, Karen as well, and to Abigail, who we just learned is going to be leaving us for a great job at Illinois Public Media. We've really enjoyed your reporting here and love your contribution on the show, and let's see that career continue to soar.
Yes, thank you, Mike.
Looking forward to it.